Say your first and last name.
My first name is Russell. My last name is May. Middle
Oh,
name is Edward. My designation is the second.
all right, Mr. Russell May. Do you think that tourism has a positive or a negative impact on the world?
I think that is a very, very difficult question. I think it has both positive and negative impacts. But I also think it depends on where the tourism is taking place, um, socially, politically, economically, and culturally. I also think that it depends on the people who are partaking of this tourism. Um, for instance, my one of my aunts from Brazil turned 70 just recently. Part of the family's here in the United States, part is in Brazil, so we agreed to meet in the Caribbean. I'd never been to the Caribbean before. We went to the Dominican Republic, and when we got there, there were these lavish resorts. So my wife and I took a walk along the beach. We were walking along the beach,
Hmm.
and eventually those lavish resorts come to an end, a pretty abrupt end. And you have these really, really poor constructions, facsimiles of houses. So I think there can be a lot of exploitation that happens, even though the tourism can bring jobs and opportunities for the people who live in these underdeveloped places, like the Dominican
Yes.
Republic or even Brazil in many places. Um, However, it can turn it into kind of an exploitative economy in which people are working for lowered wages and they're essentially the paid servants of the world's rich.
Okay, and that kind of leads into my second question. Do you think that's a good thing that tourism only shows like the positive parts of a country, or do you think that's more the negative that it does that?
Well, usually when a country promotes its own tourism, it's just showing the positive. For example, it makes me think about the World Cup in 86,
Hmm.
1986 in Mexico City. Well, the highway between the airport in Mexico City and downtown where the stadium is, there are slums on either side. What did they do? They built giant walls on both sides. The World Cup was in Rio de Janeiro, where I used to live, in Brazil in 2014. Same situation. Airport's far away, and from the stadium, you have to go on this long highway. There's slums on either side. They did the same thing. They're just hiding it and they're showing you the positive aspects. Although in places like Brazil, people are starting to make income from tourism of touring the slums in Brazil because everybody knows about them in games like GTA. You go through the favelas, the slums of
Yeah.
Rio, or the movie City of God. So they've started to make money off of that. They're making money from their own exploitation.
So that would be positive then.
I guess in a way, and hopefully it'll create some awareness of the fact that not everybody lives in a four-bedroom house with a two-car garage like many Americans tend to think.
Yeah.
They just don't.
All right. And for my third and final question, do you
Mhm.
think that tourism would damage the environment of of any sort of country? Like, you know, how like some people are used to a certain way in one country, and then if they go into another country, they live that same certain way, and it could damage
Yeah,
something.
right. We take our culture with us wherever we go, and if our culture is destructive, sure, absolutely. But I also think that when we engage in touristic activities, I'm not sure that we're always treating that place the same way we would treat our own place,
Hmm.
um, our own little corner of the world, so to speak. Plus, a lot of environmental difficulties can arise from tourism, especially when it comes to construction of hotels and facilities
Oh yes.
and things like this. But I believe people take their culture with them no matter where you go. And if your culture is not respectful of other cultures, yes, I
Oh,
think
of
it can
course.
cause damage. Mhm.
Alrighty then. Well, thank you, Mr. May. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your
Well,
answers.
thank you, sir. I do appreciate your time.